want to start off by asking you a question. You know, is there something that you're chasing right now? I mean, something that you're really pursuing. Maybe you've been wanting to start that business, or maybe you're trying to take your business to the next level, or have you been wanting to write the book, or maybe you're looking for that fulfilling, happy relationship, or maybe you've been trying to position yourself so that you could figure out what your passion is and be able to live out your passion every day. What's that thing in your life that you're chasing? And I believe that all of us should have something that we're passionate about. As a matter of fact, there's a gentleman who once said, you've got to chase down your passion like it's the last bus of the night. There's got to be something that you're pursuing in your life, something that you're looking to accomplish. And yesterday evening, I got an opportunity to spend some time over dinner and some time having great conversation with a young man who knows what it's like to have a chase, to be pursuing something in life, but not just to chase it, but to finally accomplish it. But let me tell you something, it wasn't easy. He had to overcome a lot of odds. And the gentleman I'm talking about is a gentleman by the name of Anthony Robles. And you may have heard of him. You may have seen him on TV. You may have seen him on ESPN. You may have saw his story come across the news. You may have picked up and read his book called Unstoppable, or you may have heard things about his upcoming movie. But Anthony, for those of you who don't know who Anthony is, Anthony's mom had Anthony when she was only 16 years old. And as if that wasn't going to be challenging enough, she was not prepared for what the doctors were to come in and tell her after she gave birth to Anthony. You see, right after giving birth to Anthony, they snuck him out of the hospital room and they brought him back in to look at his mom and say, hey, we don't really have any kind of way to really explain this to you, but we just got to let you know that your son was born without a right leg. And so, as if it wasn't already difficult enough for his mom, 16 years old, pregnant, gives birth to a child. Also, the man who impregnated her, the man who was supposed to be there, was not much of a man. He was a little boy. He ran away when he found out she was pregnant. And now she's about to be a single mother with a child born with only one leg. But the reason why many of you may have heard of Anthony is over the years, he has overcome all odds and decided to take on wrestling as a sport as early as the age of 14, and eventually, against all the odds, eventually he would win the biggest title ever in wrestling. And no, I am not talking about WWF wrestling. I'm not talking about jumping off the ropes. No, I am talking about wrestling at the high school and at the collegiate level. And he eventually was an NCAA champion. That is essentially the highest you can go in wrestling outside of the Olympics, against all odds. And so here we are, we're having dinner, and it's quite a few of us that are sitting down, had the opportunity to have a couple one-on-one conversations with Anthony. And so we're sitting around this dinner table. And so throughout dinner, we're taking turns asking Anthony some questions. And there are some powerful lessons that were learned last night. And I want to share those lessons with you, because I believe in whatever it is that you're chasing, that it's important to understand these principles so that you can also be unstoppable, so that you can accomplish your goals and your dreams, so that you can make this thing happen in spite of the odds, in spite of the difficulties, in spite of what happened to you before, in spite of the things that you do not have. And so one of the things that I realized when Anthony was being asked questions, and one of the questions that we were trying to figure out is when Anthony decided to take on wrestling at the age of 14. And he said, you know, he had just literally went with one of his cousins to see his cousin during a little wrestling practice, and his cousin convinced him to come on in. And Anthony said he jumped in, and he says, man, he got beat terribly. I mean, he went home, his t-shirt's all stretched up, there's blood on his t-shirt, and he remembers coming home and telling his mom, listen, I want to wrestle. And his mom looking at him and saying, wow, that's really what you want to do? And he's like, yeah, it's fun. She looked at his shirt, stretched out, blood on it, said, it doesn't look like it's very much fun, but if that's what you want to do, then I'll support you. And so here's what Anthony shared. He said that him and his coach had to figure out what was going to work for him because of the fact that he didn't have a leg. And so much of wrestling has to do with your balance. So much of wrestling has to do with positioning and maneuvering yourself. And so clearly he was going to be at a disadvantage. But here's what he said, and here's what I want to share with you. He said when it came time, when his coach was trying to figure out a strategy to help him to develop his own specific wrestling strategy, here's what they did. They didn't focus on what he didn't have. They focused on what he had. And so I want to repeat that. They didn't focus on what he didn't have. What he didn't have was a right leg. What he didn't have was the ability to be able to balance. What he didn't have was the experience. What he didn't have was the natural innate ability to be able to do what was going to be required of him. But that's not what they focused on. No. What they did was they focused on what he had. And see, what he had was a tremendous grip. Why? Because he had spent all his life walking on crutches. All his life he was walking on crutches, and so he's had to hold on to those crutches. Those crutches been up underneath his arms, and his shoulders have always been broad. And holding on to those crutches, he had a tremendous grip. You see, what he didn't have, which a lot of people thought he was going to focus on, was the fact that he was always underweight. Why? He was missing an entire leg. So most of the time he was 25 pounds less weight than his opponent. But that's not what they focused on. No, what they focused on, the fact was that he could build up tremendous upper body strength. And so he started practicing doing pull-ups. He started practicing doing push-ups, and eventually he would set the record at his school for the most amount of push-ups and the most amount of pull-ups. And so here's what I say to you. That right now there's something that you want to do, something that you've been meaning to do, something that you're trying to accomplish. And you've been busy perhaps focusing on the things that you don't have. I don't have the college education. I don't have the resources. I don't have the experience. I don't have the loan. I don't have the people helping me out. I don't have a spouse or somebody who's in my corner who has my back. And so what I want to remind you is you got to focus on what you do have. And what you do have is something called grit. What you do have is creativity. What you do have is all these gifts, these treasures, these talents that you've been given by God. What you do have is this tremendous ability to be able to communicate. What you do have is this awesome creativity. What you do have is a powerful business mind. What you do have is resourcefulness. And so I want you to focus on what you have. Theodore Roosevelt said you got to do the best you can with what you have, with where you are right now. And thank goodness Anthony learned that lesson. And so the question is, what are you going to focus on? Are you going to allow yourself to focus on all the things that you don't have? Or are you going to learn to focus on the things that you do have? The amazing gifts and talents you had. You say, Anthony said, you know what? This was put in me very early on. He said that, when I was born with one leg, my mom had to make a decision at the age of 16 as to how she was going to treat me. And she could either treat me like I was somebody who was handicapped, or she could treat me and help me to have as normal life as possible. And he says, I remember when I would have a conversation with my mom, and he says being early on when she could actually talk to me about it. And she says, we don't know what it is yet, but she said, Anthony, you are born like that for a reason. God has a reason and a purpose for this. We just got to figure it out. And so his mom never allowed him to feel sorry for himself. His mom never allowed him to feel like he was inadequate. No. Rather, she made him focus on all the things that he did have, the gifts, the treasures, the talents that he did have. And so I'm asking you right now to think about what are the things that you have. And I want you to start putting your attention there. Somebody said, whatever you focus on the longest becomes the strongest. If you focus more on your assets, you focus more on your gifts, they begin to magnify. But if all you're focusing on is scarcity and the things that you don't have, unfortunately, you lose sight of all the things that you do have. And so I want you to write that down. Just know that you need to focus on what you have and stop focusing on what you don't have. Now, here's the other thing, and I love this. So we're around the table, and somebody said, Anthony, let me ask you a question. When you are about to go up against your opponents, you are at the collegiate level now, and you're about to go up against your opponents. They said, listen, Anthony, did you sit down and watch and review the tapes of your opponents to understand what their strengths were, to understand what their weaknesses were, so that you could get an idea of what your strategy or what your approach would be. And Anthony said, you know what? Believe it or not, he says, I never ever watched a tape of my opponent. And he said, the reason why I never wanted to watch the tape of my opponent, he said, I didn't want to psych myself out. You see, I didn't want to make myself fearful, because when you're watching an opponent's tape, all you're doing is you're watching all their strong suits. You're watching all the amazing things that they can do. And so what you could end up doing is psyching yourself out and convincing yourself that you can't beat your opponent. And so he said that here's what would happen. He said my coach would watch my opponent's tape, and then my coach would just send me a text message. He says, I still have the text messages. We're going to incorporate them. They were incorporated in my book. We're going to incorporate them in the movie. He says, I have the text messages, and my coach would just tell me the things that I need to focus on. And so this is what I need you to get, because this was a powerful lesson. And so basically, this is what I got from Anthony's response. He said, don't be so fixated on what you're going up against. Don't be fixated on the obstacles. Rather, focus on what needs to be done right now. I'm going to say that one more time. Don't be so fixated on what you're going up against, the economy, what you're going up against, that you don't have the right degrees behind your name, what you're going up against, the fact that you're a long shot at doing this thing. Don't be so fixated on what you're going up against. No, rather, focus on what you need to be doing right now, which is making the phone calls, what you need to be doing right now, which is going to the seminars and the workshops and getting your knowledge, what you need to be doing right now by outlining and starting to write your book, what you need to be doing right now, working out in the mornings, what you need to be doing right now, spending quality time with your loved ones. Don't be fixated on what you're going up against. Those obstacles, they're going to be there. And he says, listen, it doesn't matter what you're facing. What you're facing is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is what you're chasing. Yeah. It doesn't matter what you're facing. Yeah, what you're facing is irrelevant. It's just a momentary setback. It's just been put in your way to help you to grow. It's just one of those things that you just got to go through so you can get to the next level. No, it doesn't matter what you're facing. The only thing that matters is what you're chasing. And so you've got to put the value on what it is that you're pursuing in life. And so you not only do you have to put the value on what you're pursuing, but ultimately you've got to say, in order for me to accomplish this thing, what do I need to be doing right now? And so part of Anthony's success was the fact that he wasn't focused on what his opponent was doing. He wasn't focused on what all the obstacles were, on what the strong suits of his opponent was. No. He was focused on what he needed to do in the time period to prepare him for the opportunity that was going to be in front of him. And so what happens to many of us, unfortunately, we begin to invest our time, our effort, and our energy focusing on the obstacles. And so we start building up a big argument. And when people get around us and they're having conversations with us, a lot of our conversations are around the obstacles. A lot of our conversations are on the things that aren't working out for us. The conversations are around what we don't have. The conversations are around what it is that we've got to overcome, instead of the conversation and that energy being exerted on what needs to be done right now. And so the question is, what do you need to be doing right now to accomplish whatever it is that you're looking to pursue right now? What do you need to be doing right now to write that book? What do you need to do right now to start the business? What do you need to do right now to take your business to the next level? What do you need to do right now to develop your voice? What do you need to do right now to start giving birth to your dreams and all the things that you've been wanting to pursue, the things that you've been wanting to accomplish? What do you need to do right now? And stop living in the past. Stop focusing on all the things that you should have done or could have done, and stop focusing on the obstacles, but rather focus on right now, the present, what has to be done. And so Anthony said, I didn't watch the footage. Yeah, why do I want to watch the footage of my opponent? Why do I want to sit there and play this comparison game like so many of us do? When we look around and we see somebody else who's further on than us, we look around and see somebody else who's making more income than us. We look around and see somebody else who appears to be more talented than us. And so we allow that to discourage us because we're in this comparison game. Stop playing the footage in your mind. Stop reviewing the tape in your mind. You're exerting too much energy. You need to exert the energy on what you need to be doing right now. And so the only question is, what do you need to do right now? And your energy and focus needs to be on what needs to be done. And so what is that for you right now, for you to get to that next level? What do you need to be doing in this moment? And so finally, after we had dinner, we had an opportunity now where Anthony was asked one more question. And they say, Anthony, you know, you have such an amazing story, remarkable story. I mean, you were born with no leg. You know, people counted you out. You decided to start taking on wrestling, and people thought it was cute at first. Oh, that's so nice. He's taking on wrestling. He's trying. And when you first started wrestling, people felt bad for you. They said you not having a leg was a major disadvantage. And then all of a sudden, when you got real good, you were putting in the time, the effort, the energy to step up your game. Now they went from saying that you not having a leg was a disadvantage. Now all of a sudden, because you started beating people, they said that you not having a leg was an advantage. And they said that you've hit the highest plateau. You are NCAA champion. There's very few in the world who can say that. And so they said, well, you know, there's got to be youth out there. There's people out there who are looking up to you right now. People right now who would love to hear, what do you have to say? And so if you had an opportunity to say something to the youth, if you had an opportunity to say something to the entrepreneur, if you had an opportunity to say something in order to bless somebody, he said, what would you say to them? And he was saying a couple of things, but there was something he threw in there in the middle that summed up everything. And so here's what he said. He said, you've got to grind before you shine. You've got to grind before you shine. You see, most of us, we want to shine, right? We want the shine. That's what we want. We want the shine of being able to say that I am a published author. I'm a best-selling author. We want the shine to be like, hey, I'm a motivational speaker. I'm a coach. We want the shine to be able to say that, you know, I've got an extraordinary business. The business is doing absolutely phenomenal. We want to be able to shine to say, hey, I've got a happy marriage, a happy relationship. You know, we want to be able to shine and say, hey, I'm living my passion. I'm doing that thing that I've always wanted to do. But we forget, before you can have the shine, you've got to grind. You've got to be willing to put in the work. You see, most people don't know. Now they see Anthony, who has recently wrote his book, Unstoppable. Now they see Anthony, who's being able to travel all across the country now because he signed up with a speaking bureau and he's getting significant amount of money delivering keynote messages. Now they see Anthony, who is in the process right now of actually having a movie created, and there's talks of there being some very big name actors who are going to be playing out the roles in his movie. Now they see Anthony, who after being featured on the Jay Leno show had over 5,000 Facebook requests in less than an hour. Now they see Anthony, whose phone is ringing off the hook with people who are calling him in to speak, and people who would love to be able to offer him a book deal and offer him another movie deal. All this thing, all this shine that they see, but what they didn't see was the grind. Yeah, what they didn't see was the little boy that only had one leg. What they didn't see was when he wrestled his first wrestling season and he got on the team, that he placed last in the entire city with a record of 5-8. He had the worst record in the entire city. What they didn't see was the moment when he had finally made his mark in high school, and he was looking for the opportunity to go to college, and nobody wanted to give him a college scholarship. All the places that he went to get a wrestling scholarship, none of them wanted to approve him, and speculation is that it was mostly because that he didn't have a leg. None of them saw that finally he got an opportunity, and when he did, he was redshirted the first year, and when he finally got his opportunity to wrestle, he basically decided that he was going to quit because it was too too difficult. And it was a transitional period in the locker room when his coach walked in there and he thought his coach was officially telling him to leave the team because he was in the middle of wrestling somebody. And while he was down on the mat, coach told him, listen, you want to be on this team, you've got to beat this guy. And Anthony wrestled the guy 5 times in a row, and all 5 times he lost. And on the 6th time, he had his back on the mat, and he couldn't even get up. And his coach that was giving him an opportunity at college looked down at him over the mat and said, Anthony, you're not who we thought you were. No. We thought you could make it. We thought you could wrestle at this level. You're not who we thought you were. Go ahead and go to your locker. Get your stuff and leave. And Anthony talks about that moment, going back to that locker, upset, pulling all his stuff, cannot even begin to pack his things fast enough. And as he's taking all of his stuff out of his locker and his coach walks in there and he's already made it up in his mind that if the coach says one more thing to him, he's ready to fight the coach. And so the coach comes up to him, shuts the door, and he's thinking they're about to go at it. And finally the coach puts his arm around him and he hugs him. And right when he thought it was all over, in that moment, the coach reminded him, he said, hey man, life is only about 10% what happens to you. The other 90% is how you respond. How are you going to respond? Are you going to continue to grind? And so those are just glimpses of the grind for Anthony. Those are just glimpses of the process of learning how to wrestle with just one leg, of going after challenger and having to find his own unique techniques and build up his upper body strength and have to literally wrestle so many guys and lose before he could become phenomenal and be great and land the national championship. And so he had to learn how to grind before he could shine. And so what I'm saying to you is this, that you know what? It may very well soon be your time to shine. But understand, before you can shine, you got to be willing to grind. And you see, part of the grind is making the phone calls. Part of the grind is doing the things today that others won't do in order to have the things tomorrow that others won't have. Les Brown said that. Part of the grind is being willing to step outside of your comfort zone. Part of the grind is to be willing to do whatever it takes. Part of the grind is to find a way to dig deep and outside of the circumstances, outside of everything that you're facing, that you say to yourself that I'm going to make this thing happen. Part of the grind is doing the thing that's uncomfortable right now. Part of the grind is choosing to do what's hard. Part of the grind is understanding that you can't judge yourself based off of the people who are right and left. Your biggest competition is yourself. You've got to look at yourself in the mirror and say, if it's got to be, it's up to me. That's part of the grind. Yeah. You got to grind before you can shine. I love when Anthony said that. And so many of us want to shine, but we forget that that before you can have the shine, you got to be willing to grind. So I'm going to go back to asking you that question. What are you chasing? What is it that you're looking to accomplish? I want you to think about what that is. And then I want you to answer this question. What are you willing to do in order to make this thing happen? Are you willing to just simply focus on what you have rather than what you don't have? Understanding that you've got to do the best you can with what you have, with where you are right now. Strong words by Theodore Roosevelt. And not only that, do you understand that it doesn't matter what you're facing? What you're facing is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is what you're chasing. Are you willing to let go of this fixation on all the obstacles, the fixation on what your opponents are doing, and just simply focus on what you got to do right now in this moment? And so, yes, I know eventually it will be your time to shine. But my question for you is, in this moment, are you willing to grind? Are you willing to grind every single day towards your goals and your dreams, even when you're not seeing the results that you want, even when your bank account doesn't reflect what you know that you're capable of, even when there's been times when, unfortunately, you feel as if some things are not going your way, even in those moments when you start to second guess yourself and you're wondering if this thing is going to work out for you? Are you willing to grind before the shine? Yeah. The name of Anthony's book is Unstoppable. And I believe that if you're listening to this message right now, that you're also unstoppable. Take these lessons to heart. And let's just add on to the Anthony stories out there in the world. This is Andy Henriquez reminding you to always show up for your life. Because if you don't, ladies and gentlemen, no one else will.
Yes, yes.